Get off my lawn! Hey, Larkin Rose here, being old anarchist yelling at cloud today. The third episode of The Anarchists just aired on HBO a few nights back. And I'm going to see if I can keep this below the level of a tirade, maybe just at the level of a rant. Not complaining about the show at all, because as usual, the show is doing an awesome job of telling a story of something that actually happened. But that episode in particular, and it has, lots of the drama and the heartache and really sad stuff happening and scary stuff happening and all that. And happening to people I know. I personally know almost everyone in the whole thing. So that makes it scary and sad and a bunch of other stuff. So that drama is the story and all that. But it reminded me, just that overall episode reminded me of something that's just been an annoyance to me for 26 years. Well, not even that long, because there wasn't a movement when I started. Because I've been an anarchist for 26 years, so there wasn't a voluntarist movement for a whole lot of that. But something that just kind of bugged me, so I'm gonna have a small tantrum about it here and explain why. The concepts of voluntarism and self-ownership and non-aggression and a stateless society and all that are philosophical ideas of how people should interact. And really, it boils down to one idea, which is don't initiate violence against other people. I mean, that sort of oversimplifies it a little bit, but that's the general thing. Anything else you want to do and anything else you believe in, whatever your preferences and values and priorities and lifestyles and personality, that's all secondary. And I admit that I'm an antisocial freak or asocial freak. So I'm not into partying and hanging out with crowds and stuff. I go to events every once in a while because I think it's a way to get out a message out that I think is really important. But there's a whole bunch of peripheral stuff in events all the time. And I'm not going to pick on Anarchapulco alone, because it's true literally of every event that ever happens that has to do with freedom, where because it's a bunch of people getting together, they do a bunch of people things. And a lot of it has nothing to do with the concepts of self-ownership and stuff. And very different personalities can sort of perceive that differently. Like the series The Anarchist shows there's a bunch of people who go to Anarchapulco who like to party and dance and play loud music. That's boring music, if you ask me, just my personal opinion. And a bunch of people do, pot or cocaine or all sorts of stuff, lots of stuff, none of which I actually do because I'm a boring goody-good. A number of them I think are actually useful to a lot of people, like marijuana and psilocybin. And I think there's a bunch of things that's actually not bad if used in moderation and can actually be a positive benefit. There's harder stuff that's more dangerous that I'm like, okay, I can think that's a bad idea for people to do, but whatever, I'm not their babysitter, so it's not up to me. So my problem isn't that people are doing it, it's that when you mix together the ideas of voluntarism and non-aggression and stuff with, hey man, everybody go party for a while, it gives the impression that they're related, and they're not. You can do that, and that's fine. And then there's the principles. So there's, I know a bunch of very conservative voluntarists. I know a bunch of self-described Christian anarchists who are very conservative as far as what they do in their lifestyles and stuff. But they would never force anything on anybody else. And the wide array of attitudes and lifestyles and beliefs that you can have and also be a voluntarist kind of gets messed up if there's this impression that, well, here's this event and we're about voluntarism and anarchism and that stuff, and we're also doing this other stuff. And it's not that the other stuff is bad at all, but it always sort of bothered me that, if this is an event about this thing, I wish it was more about this thing. And again, it's not my event, so who cares what I think? It's not up to me. It would just sort of be my preference. And it goes in a whole bunch of different directions, because there's the hippie type stuff of we have herbs and healing crystals and astrology and a whole bunch of stuff. I actually think there's stuff in there that really is, useful and helpful. And there's a bunch of stuff in there that I think is just mythology. Now, does it matter what I think? No, not really. Can people do that stuff? Absolutely. Duh. But when you mix that together with the principles of voluntarism, it can give the impression to other people that this is what voluntarism is about. No, it isn't. Not at all. Not in the slightest way. It's what a lot of people who are voluntarists can be about, and that's perfectly fine. But the thing is, this feeds the guilt by association thing where people can get the impression that, oh, if you're not a partier, you're not into cocaine, or you're not into ayahuasca, or you're not into whatever the hell, then I guess that place isn't for me and those ideas aren't for me, which is kind of unfortunate, because the ideas are literally for everybody. Now, this doesn't even have to do with whether I agree with what people are doing. Like, I even have the same criticism towards people who talk about a whole bunch of different conspiracies. Now, partly that directly ties in with government to point out that when you give authoritarian power, here are some of the evil psychotic things they do. And a whole lot of conspiracy theories are completely and obviously true. And then some of them are really weird and some of them are debatable and everything in between. So I'm not saying, oh, conspiracies are always crazy, never talk about them. I'm saying that when the outside viewer gets the impression that, well, if you're a voluntarist, you have to think that 9/11 was an inside job. No, you don't. Like, I think it totally was. But that's not part of the principles of voluntarism. And even like understanding the Federal Reserve, which that's not even a conspiracy theory, it's right out in the open, and they literally admit all of it. It's just most people don't ever look into it and don't learn about it. But again, some of that actually ties in with authoritarianism, because you can point out when you have a ruling class, this is the sort of thing they're going to do. So there is at least a link there. But when people harp on a whole bunch of conspiracies, theories and facts, and any combination of that, if that gets related to the principles, again, it gets muddled. And I wish there was a clear thing about, here are the actual principles. And you can think whatever you want about a million other things. You can have whatever, you can think they're freaking lizard people ruling the world, which I think is ridiculous. And the problem is, not only do normal people look at it and go, well, a bunch of that made sense, but they're lizard people? What the hell? Like, in their minds, they can think, well, that's sort of weird. And so they sort of think maybe the principles are about that and you have to believe these weird things. The trouble is, there are people in power who do that on purpose, who do the guilt by association thing on purpose. And I think they, on occasion, here's a conspiracy for you, things like the flat earth movement growing, I think that is absolutely a psyop designed to make truth seekers look like ignorant doofuses. And I know a number, not a huge number, but I know a number of voluntarists who think the earth is flat because they're really bad at geometry and physics and don't know how science actually works. But to basically just hand those in power such an easy opportunity to say that, well, if you doubt that government should have the right to control you, you're probably one of those people who think the earth is flat. And it makes a perfectly convenient guilt by association trick. And I really think that is why that particular thing has grown. But even when things are true, even when conspiracies are true, to mix it together as if you need all that to understand the basic principles is a net negative. And so for years and years and years, all sorts of events I've been to They've had a bunch of speakers that it's not that I disagree with them, because if somebody's like debating the concepts of voluntarism and they want to debate what counts as aggression and we disagree, or they want to debate what counts as, consent and we disagree. Like, if the debate is in the realm of the actual topic, okay, fine. But so many different speakers and activities and this, that, and the other thing are peripheral stuff that's not really even related. It's like what those people happen to care about, which is fine. But when you jumble them all together into one event, it starts to feel like, oh, well, I guess you have to be all these things. And so, like watching the series, The Anarchists, somebody could totally get the impression, oh yeah, these people who believe this are all like hard partiers and they're all snorting coke and shit. And no, we're not. I don't ever do that. And if people want to do that, that's fine. But that's completely unrelated to understanding these principles. But it gets mangled up in people's heads. Even the crypto thing. Now, there's part of the crypto thing that's very relevant and related, because the way authoritarian power has been exerted over the whole world for the last gazillion years has largely been by way of how the banking and currency systems work, which are just 100% fraudulent. Now, the principle of self-ownership makes all of that fall apart, even if the people don't understand how that's happening, and they don't even know it's happening. So crypto is a very useful thing to undermine the power of authoritarian ruling classes. It's sort of like firearms. There's in lots of freedom things, there's a big thing about firearm ownership, and there'll be like a gun show afterwards, or we're going to go target shooting afterwards. And even that I would nitpick a little bit about, even though I completely believe in the right to keep and bear arms. I'm armed myself. I think the main reason to be armed is to be able to resist aggressors, which includes aggressors with badges. Now that's conspiratorial and scary and whatever. But I still wouldn't focus so much on, now we're going to go have a big thing with guns, in a way that could give other people the impression, like some random pacifist watching, oh, okay, well, I'm not into guns, so I guess I'm not into those ideas. And the thing is, this problem is only a problem because people are so muddle-headed that they will associate, sort of group together a whole bunch of stuff and go, well, I'm not like those people. And if I watched The Anarchists, the HBO series, mostly I'd be thinking, well, I'm not like those people. Like, there's a few people, oh yeah, you're saying stuff, I agree with those principles, but I'm not with the partiers, and I'm not really with the hippies. There's some overlap, but not really with the hippies. And the people talking about crypto and the concept's great, but the whole thing of having your life being about playing that game and investing and trying to make tons of money, if you want to do that, absolutely. That's not really my thing, and I don't really care that much about the sort of the playing the stock market equivalent of it, which a lot of people did very well, and good for them. But you can actually see in the criticisms where people are like, oh, they're just about getting rich. Well, no, they're not, but they showed that part of it in the series, and so some people can think it's just about getting rich. Now, what's kind of ironic is, and I mentioned this before, is, of course, the show is mostly going to be about noteworthy things happening. And when you have an event with 1,000 people at it, and almost all of them just have a fun time and talk and do stuff, and like, okay, well, we're not going to cover that for 6 episodes. It would be boring as hell. Covering it for 10 minutes would be boring as hell. That's the majority of what happens at Anarchapulco, is people sitting around chatting about all sorts of stuff and having a friendly, good time, but that's not really noteworthy. Meanwhile, up in the hills, there's a, scary, horrible drama going on, and that's noteworthy. That's a story. So that's what they tell. But the impression, and so again, this isn't at all a complaint about the series, because that's how you tell a story. You tell the parts of the, like, oh, and then the axe murderer came in, and now we're going to spend 20 minutes describing the color of the shoes of the... No, you talk about the things that are significant and scary or happy or depressing or whatever, like the things of note. And a whole lot of things not of note don't get mentioned. And so most of what went on at Anarchapulco doesn't get mentioned, because it would be really boring to mention it. But partly, and the mainstream media has their agenda, obviously, but partly when they say they wanted paradise, but it descended into hell. Meanwhile, most of the people at Anarchapulco are like, what are you even talking about? Like, at some point, they may have heard about the shooting that happened up in the hills, like miles away from the event and having nothing to do with the event, except that the victims of it were like sort of part of the community. So that's the connection. But it's like I said before, if you had a chess club and a member just got killed on some back alley of New York, do you go, oh, well, this is what chess clubs lead to? No, that's stupid. But a lot of people are stupid enough and muddled enough in their head that they're going to think that, oh, if you believe in like live and let live, then murder's going to happen. No, that's not how it works. But given that people are that bad at thinking and having clarity of thought, I've always wished that when there's an event, it all the way focused on that. And afterwards, people can go party and do whatever the hell they want. And, they can do whatever they want at the event, too. If it's not my event and I'm not deciding it, it's just sort of, it would be a preference of mine that it would be all the way focused on the principles. So everybody who agrees on the principles, whether, very conservative Christian anarchists or complete hippies or, gun-toting maniacs, whatever, non-violent maniacs, non-aggressive maniacs, can all go, yeah, we all totally agree on that. And that's the beauty of voluntarism, is it actually allows for all of that other stuff and for people to peacefully coexist, as long as they believe these very simple, basic, fundamental rules of how to be a human being. But that can so easily get lost in all the noise when an event has a bunch of peripheral stuff that's not really related to the principles, and that tends to confuse people. And then on top of that, you have the thing of personalities. Like the people will say, well, I like the principles, but I don't like that guy that they're featuring, or this guy did a talk and they invited that guy to speak at this event, so I don't like them anymore. And when people do that thing of focusing on personalities, that too is a distraction. Like if some complete maniac said 2 + 2 is 4, well, it still is, even if it turns out that guy killed and ate his neighbors. 2 + 2 is still 4. That guy's a psycho, and that particular statement he made is true. But again, that's just a thing that human beings do. They latch onto, I like this person and what this person has to say. It's like, well, if you like what the person has to say because what they're saying makes sense, then be attached to the ideas and the concepts and the principles. And the moment they go off, the moment that person says something that to you sounds stupid, then don't just take their word for it. Don't go into the cult of personality mode and go, well, and don't go in the other direction where it's like, well, that guy also believed, because pretty much any speaker at any freedom conference I've ever been at and spoken at, I can find things that they've said in other aspects of their life that I disagree with. Things that mostly don't matter, either ways they choose to live their life, or things they believe are true and I think aren't, or whatever. And it doesn't matter. We can still peacefully coexist if we agree on the concept of voluntarism. But when people think like that and think, well, this event invited that guy and he believes lizard people are ruling the world, it is a problem, because you can just imagine how people not familiar with the ideas, who already think it sounds weird and kooky and strange, just like I did when I first contemplated the idea of you can't have no government, we have to have government, you always have government, it's chaos and mayhem. I assumed that. And so if people are starting in that mindset, having the representatives, I hate the fact that there are representatives of the idea at all, including when it's me. I hate that too, because I'm not trying to sell me. I'm not trying to be the emperor of anarchy. I'm a guy saying things. And if I say things and you find truth in the stuff I say, cool. And if you're grateful for that, awesome. I totally appreciate when people appreciate me saying the things, but it's the ideas that matter. I'm not asking to adopt you or asking you to vote for me for emperor of the world. I'm just saying stuff, but a lot of people tend to go in the direction of following personalities, and I think that usually ends in a mess. And so, as I watch this series, again, very well made. This is not a complaint about the series at all, because it tells the story. A thing that occurs to me if I'm being grouchy old man is when they say, well, this doesn't put us in a very good light. We're going to collectivize anarchists. And my immediate thought is, well, we did that. That's us. That's a documentary of us. Now, it's not me partying, but we were, if you're pretending anarchists are a collective, and doing the hippie stuff or doing the whatever some spectator might say, well, I don't agree with that. We were doing that. And when it's part of an event that we were at, it starts to look to the observer like all that other peripheral stuff is somehow essential to the underlying philosophy when it's not. But it's a true story being told. So if you don't like how it makes anarchists look, complain at the anarchists that it's telling the true story about and say, maybe could you be less psychotic and handle things better and less confrontational? And, but people are going to be people. But because of the way observers are so easily biased against people and in favor of people based on things that have nothing to do with what they're actually saying, it's for years and years and years, this has been a problem of mine, that I go to an event and they're like, okay, I'm going to give my talk, I'm going to do a seminar, I'm going to do whatever my part is, and then I'm going to hang around, talk to people, and have lots of awesome discussions that nobody's going to report on because it would be boring as hell to videotape and play back a million discussions. Well, some weirdos who like to think might enjoy that, but it's not that an exciting a story. People aren't dying and there isn't lots of drama and conflict and stuff. But knowing how hard it is to get people to question their fundamental assumptions and paradigms, to have that much noise that's unrelated in the way, which has happened at every event and with every organization and everything else. And, oh, well, this organization does really good, but it turned out that guy who's part of the founders of this organization, turns out that he was doing from stuff. And it's like, yeah, but whether or not that's true, that's irrelevant to whether the principles are true. But most people don't think that way. And I realize it's impossible to all the way disconnect the ideas with people, because people have to say them, and the people aren't going to be perfect, and they're going to do dumb things and get things wrong, and because people are people. But just watching the whole series has just reminded me of the frustrations of looking at it from the vantage point of someone new to this. And if you look at any of the events I've been to, like the Pork Freedom Festival that I went to for years, then it turned more political, and I haven't. I might go back because it may be going in the other direction again. But there's literally a big section. It happens at a campground. There's a big section of here's where we, the part where there's kids and stuff, and so we keep things tame over here. We're not like drug use. Down there, people might be streaking and running around naked and cross-dressing and snorting coke and whatever the hell they want. But we're smart enough to plan ahead of time, so the people that don't really want that, we're going to be over here, you be over here. And it's a perfect little microcosm of here's how, peaceful coexistence actually works. You can do what you want. Just, if we know you're doing that over there, we might do this over here. Meanwhile, I'm hiding by a rock somewhere because I don't want part of most of this, just because I'm antisocial and avoid people most of the time. But at literally any single event I've ever been to, I could pick any outside observer, any statist, and if it was up to me, I could find some people there that would turn them off to the ideas because they don't match, they don't vibe, they're not of the same personality, they're not of the same mindset or priorities. And so there's always the potential that someone's going to be turned off by something that has nothing to do with the actual principles. And so it's sort of an impossible problem to all the way solve because we're still going to involve people. But just the third episode of The Anarchist just so much reminded me of what a challenge it already is to get these ideas out and how much harder the challenge becomes when it appears to the outside world like these ideas are necessarily intermingled with party hardy and everybody's doing coke, or you believe in astrology and healing crystals, or you're all about making billions of dollars in crypto. And You don't have to be any of them. You can be any of them, but you don't have to be any of them to grasp the principles. And unfortunately, in my view, it's almost never just focused on that. Like, we have an event that's just about talking about these ideas and how to share them with the rest of the world. And the rest of the peripheral stuff, what people want to do, have at it. That's fine. But it's always annoyed me how easily a spectator can get confused between very simple principles that actually align with who they really are inside. And that's what my Candles in the Dark thing shows, that you can bring out of almost anyone all of the voluntarist principles, because they already, on a basic level, their conscience already knows, don't just attack people. And then they've been taught status garbage on top of that. But when you're already trying to sell them something that, sell them an idea, not sell them, just convince them of an idea that goes against, their entire lifetime of indoctrination, to have all this other noise that can distract them is just annoying. And the thing is, I don't at all blame the filmmakers, Kim and Todd, who are friends of ours, who made it. I don't blame them for telling the story of what actually happened, but I do wince a little bit about how self-described anarchists actually behave a lot of the time. And just in case I haven't offended anybody, I'll end with this, and it's the thing I've said before. Anytime there's a new movement that's contrary to sort of the status quo, it's going to have more than its fair share of freaks and weirdos. I've said this before, and in some ways I consider myself a freak and weirdo. But when someone is served by the status quo, they're way less likely to question it. When somebody has had a rough time and they've been abused by the system and stuff, they're way more likely, they have way more of a psychological incentive to say, I'm not sure this is fair. Is this okay? And actually question the underlying thing. So the result is you're going to get a bunch of freaks and weirdos in any new movement, and voluntarism is no exception. You get a bunch of kind of strange personalities. They don't have to be bad strange. They get there's a bunch of people I know that I really like. They're kind of on the weird side. And then there's some that I don't trust and are kind of scary and dangerous on the weird side. But it's so easy because something new usually attracts the weirdos. And as a result, they usually believe a bunch of other weird stuff, a lot of it not being true and not making any sense. It's very easy for the people who are still in the status quo to go, oh, that's just something weirdos believe. And the good that I hope will come out of the HBO series, and the good that I hope will come out of literally everything I ever work on, is people finally starting to realize, oh, people can have different priorities and be weirdos or be normal and educated and proper and respectable, and all come to realize that, oh yeah, these principles are kind of obvious, and authoritarianism is kind of obviously contrary to morality and sanity when you actually look down to the base of it, and all the peripheral noise doesn't really matter. And I do think that even with all the noise and all the, cringing I have to do watching the series and looking at self-described anarchists, behaving in ways that are sometimes psychotic and confrontational and whatever else, I do think it's an opportunity for a lot of normal people to say, okay, there's this story of what's going on with these people, and that guy's kind of crazy, and I can see this argument, and I might side with them. But what were those things they were saying about having no ruling class and we own ourselves and everything based on, well, what was that? To actually have the ideas outlive the noise. And the thing is, I'm going to end on the high point. It will. And I've said this before, the ideas will always outlast the movements, the personalities, the organizations. The message will always outlive the messengers, and that's what actually matters. And it's totally going to happen in this case too. In the meantime, I'll just grumble and wince a little bit when I when I look at what other people may think of as anarchists when they're watching this, if they're not clear in their head about the difference between personalities and principles. But it still wins. And the fact that these ideas are being discussed at all on such a huge mainstream platform is awesome, even if it's within the context of a story where lots of people can go, okay, that's messed up, and Okay, I kind of like that person. This person's a little bit like the ideas are what matter, and the ideas outlast it all. So the outside noise may slow it down, may confuse it for a while, and may have me whine about it on a video like this. But in the end, the ideas outlive all of it, up to the point that humanity doesn't even view them as ideas anymore. They're just self-evident truths. And voluntarism is absolutely going to get to that point, as I've said before, where nobody's going to identify as a voluntarist, because it would be as silly as identifying as somebody who doesn't believe in Santa Claus. So what's your philosophy? I'm an anti-Santa Clausist. Nobody says that. Nobody needs to say that. It doesn't even occur to them to point that out about their beliefs. Humanity is going to get to the point where nobody believes in the insanity of authority and the magical rituals creating government that has superhuman rights. No one's going to believe that. We're going to look back on it and think, how the hell did anyone ever think that stupid stuff? And then we'll all go about our day as voluntarists who don't identify as voluntarists because it's so freaking obvious that now it's everybody. And humanity is going to get to that point. I would like it to happen sooner rather than later, because the faster it happens, the less suffering we have as a result of authoritarianism. But we're absolutely going to get there. And I think every time the discussion gets out there more and more, it's a good thing, even if I have to cringe at the noise mixed in there, like necessarily mixed in there. So I am going to, after grouching that whole time, I am going to end on the high note that when people ask me, well, do you really think society's ever going to be anarchist? 100% absolutely inevitable. Absolutely unavoidable. There is no way, well, unless the entire planet blows up before that happens, it is absolutely inevitable, because the ridiculousness of the lie of authoritarianism cannot last forever within a population where even some of the people can actually have critical thought and want to actually push morality forward, like true morality. And so, yes, we're going to win in the long run. I just want it to happen as fast as possible. And it happens faster if the representatives of anarchism, which is an annoying concept and shouldn't even exist, do their best to, A, not be bumbling idiots that everyone can point to and go, well, if that's what anarchism is, I want nothing to do with it. And B, make a distinction between your own priorities and preferences and values and the principles. Because if we have the principles in common, the whole freaking planet can coexist peacefully, even when we have a whole bunch of weirdos with different priorities and different belief systems and different values and everything else. And that's what humanity's supposed to be. We're not supposed to be a big collection of people who all believe and do exactly the same things. We're supposed to be a bunch of different kinds of weirdos who get along peacefully. And that's literally what voluntarism is how about we get along peacefully and everything else is secondary. And I think that concept and that idea is spreading like wildfire, and that idea will get through and it will outlast all of the periphery noise and all of the personalities and all of the weirdness and all that. So yeah, in the long run, we already won, and by we I mean humanity. Because this isn't about, I'm going to force my ideas on you. This is about when we get to everyone understanding these ideas and nobody's forcing their ideas on everybody, then we can actually start being civilized humans. And so that's my rant, followed by a out of the blue pep talk. And if you're a voluntarist watching this show and you're cringing at the weirdness, keep in mind that, yeah, that's obnoxious. It's annoying. People are going to be confused. They're going to do guilt by association. Some of it's going to be accidental. Some of it's going to be on purpose. But in the long run, if people hear the ideas at all and a little seed sticks with them that, wait, what did they say about this? The story of what happens to any individual, including me, including you, including everybody alive right now, in the long run isn't what determines whether humanity outgrows statism. And it's absolutely going to.